the amount of times you hear that devs are terrible at estimating that.
You can't expect people to write perfect HTML, and then you work on it, you get a win, you feel great, wake up the next day, have your coffee, if you drink coffee, then
the problem solved itself. But I think it's a good message to put out there. That is the game.
Hello and welcome to another episode of the Code and Character podcast. I am your host, well, one of them, Ivan, and here I am joined with Bevan, who is our other co-host. And today we're going to be talking about an interesting topic, and that is how to debug web development issues. Now, this is going to be focused more on a web application or a website, not really just software, but it can be applicable for mobile as well, or even desktop development. So let's kind of just jump straight into it. And what I want to focus first on is front-end development. Bevan, how do you debug issues on the front end?
Debug issues on the front end.
Yes. So some client says, this isn't working, fix it up. Where do you start?
Lots of practice. It's an interesting one because that's generally front end. You're either going to be talking HTML, CSS, or JavaScript. And in our world, it's generally Drupal with some theme and stuff. So often you get stuff. What's the first thing you do? Go and look in the JavaScript console? Pretty much always.
Well, first of all, you replicate it. That's the first thing.
Well,
if we go back.
Well, okay. Yes. Right. Yeah. Assuming you've replicated it,
yes.
Right? That's, I guess, you throw me there because you're absolutely right. If you can't replicate it, then that's a whole different can of worms.
Well, that's why I always go to the project manager. It's like, can we replicate it? Oh, no, it only happens on a manager's Samsung browser or something on their old
Let's
phone.
talk about replicating it then, because it brings me, there's one particular issue that comes to mind when I talk about that. Would have been a front end issue. We had a production site and they're like, this page doesn't work, right? Yeah. On prod. And that's could not replicate it. And it ended up that somebody had uploaded a massive big image on production. And I can't remember the exact details of why on the dev. Like, I think I asked a million times, like, can we get a copy of the data, please? And they're like, no. Like, that was just the way the architecture of the infrastructure, right? The DevOps was set up because it's security and all this other stuff. We can't sanitize the database, so we can't give you a copy of the database. You're going to have to replicate it. DevOps, and it's just like this one single node won't work, right? And it took me about a week, something like that, just to eventually, I can't remember, like it was a long time ago, but it was one of those trying to replicate the issue. And it was a content issue, right? It wasn't the website itself wasn't broken. It was just that some user had uploaded like a 5-10 gigabyte bloody image, and so when the page loaded, the page just went, browser tab slows up, too much data, something like that. So being able to replicate the issue is a big one, which really gets us straight to a point of having an environment that's easy to debug. I mean, it's probably one of my, they're the sort of, because you said it yourself, you just said it, then that's a terrible DevOps setup. Now we're probably going 5, 6, 7 years ago when DevOps was still a new thing anyway, right? And that's, you're working for a smaller company or a smaller at that time, where you still haven't, there is a nature of people just wanting to get things that work out fast. Like we just want it to work. The clients, we've already budgeted for this. We've told the client it's going to take a week. You've got a week, you're right. And then they whip it up and it's like, do you take shortcuts? We don't have time to set up a proper deployment pipeline. We don't have, because you and I have been around a long time. You remember before we had deployment pipelines, I remember when we used to just push a TG's, what we had a system that would package your website up into a bloody Deb, like a Unix deployable piece of software, and you'd run a deploy script, and it'd use a deb package to apt-get install it on the production server, right? That's before we had DevOps and stuff.
Yeah.
And that's back then. You didn't have sanitized database. Things have changed a lot, but you still find, at the time when DevOps coming up, it's like, can we put in a proper deployment pipeline with a proper testing before it deploys? No, we don't have time for that. And that's probably a big part of it. Funny how much it ties into debugging, because having those systems in place really help a lot, right? That's when you've got a proper staging and a proper deployment and a proper test environment that have good test data, and even test data tends to get in the way of trying to replicate a bug because it's not identical to the production data.
Yeah.
But there's a cost benefit analysis, obviously, that you've got to have, like how long does it take? But there's a lot of times where I've been in a situation where it doesn't work on prod, and trying to replicate it locally just takes so long, because it's like it works locally. I can't know, and that's story I gave you, just because someone had uploaded a 5-10 gig image and we weren't allowed to download the production data, that it never occurred to anybody to go, why don't we test it by uploading a 10 gigabyte image? Because it's just like, who'd do that, right? It's kind of not in the realm of something you'd imagine someone to do. So you're absolutely right. Like, find a way to replicate the issue is always the first thing to do, and we've talked about that before.
Just to add about the image, that's why in Drupal land, you always resize images no matter what. Even if they say, oh, we want a massive hero image and we don't care how wide it is, just for the fact to stop people from uploading TIFF files or massive images, at least then on the front end, it is rendered down and resized. Always, this is a code of character top tip right here. Always set up your image styles to resize images no matter what in Drupal. It will save you time, because I've had similar issues as well, because you look on and this comes back to the front end, okay? If the page takes ages to load, look at the network tab in your browser and have a look and see how much is actually getting downloaded.
Hey, do you even know how to read that thing?
You learn.
I can read bits of it.
But sometimes you see 50 meg of images. It's like, oh, okay. This is a bit of an issue. 50 meg of images. We need to save a bit of time.
So it's funny that we're talking about debugging, but we've sort of very quickly moved into, and I think it's the major point, is what's the old thing? Prevention's better than cure. Right? Because we've gone straight into quality control, right? The first story we've gone wouldn't have happened if we had better quality control. Because you're going, particularly in Drupal, you've got the ability to it does it. It's built in that it can manage images. Now, whoever built the website didn't set that up. Right? And I think it's a thing with part of the industry. There is a bit, because the client doesn't know. Right? And so sometimes the client does know. There's a lot of that case. But often we're consultants in a sense, and that's through our experience. And this is a tug of war I've had in my career a lot, with having a very high level of quality and knowing what should be done, versus a project manager who's basically a proxy for the client going, don't have time. 100% always comes back and bites you in the foot. Yeah. Like, I've had that debate so many times. Don't worry about it. We'll cross that bridge when you come to it. And it's like, yeah, but I'm the one that's got to cross the bridge, and it's going to be on fire, and I'm going to fall in the pit. Like, it's but there is this. It's a budgeting issue. I think there's a thing in the industry where everybody's fighting to get things done for as low a cost as possible. It's not very often that you've got a client with a reasonable budget.
Yeah.
I've been in meetings where we sit there and spend 2 hours going around what it's going to cost. We come up with the price, and then the salesperson's just like, well, there's no way they're going to pay that. We'll quote them half. And you're like,
yeah, I've had that conversation as well.
It's like, you're just like, so you're like, well,
you spend days quoting it, and then you go back to the project manager or whoever's in charge of doing the quotes or estimates, and they're like, yep, the client's not going to pay for that. And I've had this conversation a few times where it's like, well, what they're asking for is a lot more than I'm going to pay for it. And so, all right, well, You're going to take a risk.
Yeah.
What can I do?
I found, having been around since I've been in this job since I was 18, right? I was working for an ISP doing HTML in 1996, and that's, I hear the feedback. Funny, we're so off track off the debugging thing, but it's about quality control too.
Yeah.
The amount of times you hear that devs are terrible at estimating. They always overestimate they always underestimate how long something will take. And I think that's true, because even in my personal life, like my to-do list item, I thought I'd made to give myself lots of time. I thought it'd take 2 days. Now I'm 3 weeks in, right? It's absolutely true. But especially as a junior, if you're a project manager out there and you've got juniors and juniors turn around and give you an estimate for something, it's terrible to turn around and go, how long? Right? That's because I guarantee that juniors already lowered it, right? To try
The issue with, and now this is again another podcast episode. I don't know if we've talked about estimating, but the issue that I have, developers are not terrible at estimating. What we're trying to build is so complex sometimes. And I wouldn't say it's complex, but the thing is though,
it shouldn't be, but it is.
When you think about it, compare it to building a house. There are standards when it comes to engineering. There are standards when it comes to roofing. There are standards for architects to follow to make sure that the door opens, in a particular way. All right.
The stairs are a particular height.
Exactly, for accessibility.
Tolerances, right?
Exactly. When we renovated our bathroom, we worked with a interior designer, and they told us, we can't do this by law. We need to do this, 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 and this. In web development or software, there is none of that. Now, I'm not saying that's a good thing or a bad thing, because at the end,
practices.
At the end of the day, if you write a terrible website, you're not going to, your house isn't going to go on fire. Well, I didn't want to say that, but there could be instances where terrible
I've literally had that as
people.
an argument. It's different, Bevan. People aren't going to die, and
well, it depends what the software
doesn't change the principle of. Doesn't change the quality control principles.
Yeah. But the thing is, though, you have such complexity, and also you have such domain knowledge in certain things that you can't just get any Drupal developer to come along that you know Drupal? Great. Can you estimate this custom Drupal implementation? Because chances are there's some dodgy code that you have no idea about hidden in some event subscriber that gets fired off at, only when the moon is cresting or is a waning gibbous or something. I don't know.
Exactly the situation you're going to be in too.
Yeah, where you're pulling your hair out.
That happens. Yeah, when you hit some bug that only happens in a very specific circumstance.
Very specific.
You happen to have. It only happens if you've got this version of that module and that version of that module. Yeah, and it's a crescent moon on a Saturday. It all catches on fire.
Exactly. And, or everything's in retrograde, and I don't know, all the planets align. And
so debugging, trying to replicate it, right? This is... We've got on a big rant, which is fantastic. I love this. But
anyway, yeah. Okay,
quality control is the number...
Yeah.
Just put it out there. Before you do anything else, try and get your quality control. There is no perfect world. The only thing you can be sure of is that there's a pothole around the corner. You don't know how big it is. You just know there's one there. There's always one there. That's the name of the game. I kind of, in an ideal world, things would work. They'd be documented properly. Things would be upgraded. Pieces would fit together, tested, but it's just not ever that's the case. So sometimes I think that's a really good message to put out there, though. We've got quite energetic, but I think it's a good message to put out there. That is the game. If you're in web development, you're going to get up against these problems that are hard to solve, with social pressure coming down to get it done yesterday. Someone griping, why doesn't it work? Please explain it. If I get flustered, I have a very hard time you can easily get lost in the weeds.
Yeah,
I do that a lot. I think we've talked about it before, that it's very worth taking some time out and having a break, which is very hard to do when someone's telling you need it fixed yesterday. I think as that web developers too, we've got inherent desire to problem solve. We want to solve the problem. I love to build things and stuff, but this is like my to-do list. I'm so far behind other things I was working on because I started building that to-do list, and I just wanted such a strong desire to solve the problem. And you somehow do need to take it in a logical step-by-step fashion. And I often beat myself up because once you find it, you go, I wish I'd thought of that earlier. Like if I just stepped through it that little bit better.
Yeah.
And that's kind of why I went straight to look at the error console, because it kind of is forgetting, replicating the issue, opening up first, debugging front end, opening up your JavaScript console, learning how to open your development tools in your browser.
Yeah.
First point of call every time, because the amount of time that the error message, see, funny, because I was complaining about this before, but the amount of time the error message tells you exactly what the problem is. But God allow me, I don't like it when it's vague.
Oh, yes.
But because what are you going to have? You're going to have, I'll go back where we were. We're going to have a JavaScript issue or a CSS issue.
Yeah.
Back in the day, the amount of times it was a missing HTML tag, and I haven't seen an issue like a missing closing tag, right?
Remember XHTML? Remember XHTML when that was?
Yeah, I was around when it came through.
Yeah, apparently. I remember learning about how there was a great presentation somewhere where somebody was a developer was developing an actual browser, and they were saying how you need tolerances in your browser. You can't expect people to write perfect HTML, and apparently with XHTML,
strict.
Yeah, it had to be very strict, but that would break a lot of websites.
Yeah, well, I've had that debate before. Should be strict. I don't like that. It just goes, oh, no closing tag. I'll put it in for you. It's like, Yeah. Funny enough, that's one thing. Look, using Drupal, ever since I started Drupal, I've kind of forgotten a lot of those details about HTML. Like I've said this before, when I first started learning HTML, people go, how do I learn HTML? And I go, how long does it take? I go, 10 minutes. Like, because literally, I remember we're going back, like I said, 1995. I asked my mate who I was working with, and I went to high school with him. He goes, I'll teach you HTML. He sat down with a piece of paper and he goes, so you do a HTML tag, and every tag's got to have a closing tag, and you've got to have HTML. You've got to have a head with a head and a closed head and a body and a title. And then you've got things like fonts and bold and marquee. And there you go. And that's it. That's HTML, right? In a nutshell, that's it. And it's like, so when people go, how do you learn HTML? I go, just learn that. That's it.
Yeah.
And then over time, it got complicated where you got different versions of HTML and you had to set the doc types. And then so you had to either memorize them or go and look up the right doc type. And then it behaved differently depending on what kind of doc type you got in there. XHTML came along, and that started to blow my mind a bit. I was like, I liked it when it was just HTML before it got complicated. But then things like Drupal and I imagine WordPress and stuff came along with built-in themes, and that was just already taken care of, right? The correct doc type I didn't have to worry about it. I was just in there editing HTML in templates. And for a long time now, the big difference between back then and now is that you do the shorthand closing tags.
Yeah.
Right. That's it. Other than that, it's kind of, and that is updated with spans, and, you didn't have spans and divs, and tables have gone the way of the dodo, but it's still basically the same, right?
Yeah.
So where we get to, so on one hand, it's a lot easier, but now you're generally dealing with CSS problems instead. Right? You used to always have
JavaScript as well. Well, now it's all JavaScript crap, essentially.
It's funny enough, because JavaScript, when you talk about debugging it, I forever have said I don't know JavaScript. And I think I've mentioned it before one day that we had a JavaScript trainer come into work, and they go, we're having a day of JavaScript training. Who wants to do it? I'm like, me.
Yeah.
And sat there in a room for like 7.5 hours going, yeah, okay. And then he explained anonymous functions at the end. I'm like, oh, that I didn't know. Right. And that's that whole, everything else I knew. And I still walked out going, I knew everything he said, except for that one thing. And I still don't know JavaScript. It's just a weird thing. I'm not a JavaScript person. I don't like it. I don't
Yeah.
get it. I don't understand it yet. I think I've mentioned this before. Every bug that's been thrown at me, I've managed to fix it. And yet I feel like I don't know, because I don't know. I always get, passing objects and you lose scope when you try and pass. I remember trying to write things where you're trying to pass data and you just can't get the data into the function because of the way it's all put together. And
Yeah.
but I've never had a problem. I can't. So it's kind of like big lesson I got, and I tell people this one all the time. I bring it up all the time in the Drupal Slack channel. I used it with a friend I was helping the other day because I got this from a manager of mine who I worked with for a long time. Was simplify the problem. That's why I'm forever telling people, go and set up another Drupal instance. Right? They go, this module, I've got this module, it's not talking, it's not doing this thing. It's like, take your whole big 5-year-old Drupal project away, build a core one, install the module, set it up. Does it work?
Yes.
Right? Because if it doesn't work, now you know there's a bug in the module, right?
That's it. Yeah, there you go. Oh, mate, we are chucking out these top tips. That is another
pain
good
in
one.
the ass, but it's my go-to all the time. Just get rid of everything else.
Exactly. I'll give you an example. There was recently a couple months ago, we were looking at can we now? I don't know if this is best practices, but I'll just chuck it out there because hey, we just do what we do to get by, especially in this day and age. But one of the requirements that we were looking at was indexing multiple Drupal sites into a single like OpenSearch or Solr instance. Okay. Mm-hmm. And I was thinking, all right, well, what if we just point it to the same Solr server? Like Search API, point to Drupal sites.
It's just to back it up, just in case someone doesn't get it. So you've got multiple websites. And
multiple Drupal sites, yes.
Your own search engine that has those sites all in it.
Yeah, exactly. Because we want all of these websites to just to index their content into a single instance of OpenSearch.
You one search front end, and when you search, it searches through those 5 websites. Cool.
Now, Search API always gives any type of index content an ID. All right, and it uses the node ID. So
I saw you
Search
talking
API
about this in Slack, didn't I?
:ID 123, and then I thought, I think I did ask for it in Slack. Yeah, I did.
Yeah.
And then doing my research, they were like, well, as long as the IDs are different, it doesn't care. And so what I did was this, because this project we were on was like a 7-year-old Drupal site. Like, he had a lot of customizations. What I ended up doing is I spent half a day setting up like three different Drupal sites, vanilla Drupal sites, just to see if it's possible. Because so many times I've done a POC, or that's a proof of concept.
Proof of concept, yeah.
Yes. Where
no acronyms.
Yeah, exactly. Where you try to do something, you think the module's terrible, but then you realize that there's this custom code which pretty much breaks the module. And that you didn't know about it. And that's happened to me so many times. So again, coming back to what you're saying, Bevan, absolutely. If you are going to test out something and you're not 100% sure if it's going to work, just spin up and always have multiple versions of sandbox versions of Drupal locally. I've got about 15
a Drupal core
sites
sitting there. Yeah.
Well, I create a new site every week.
I've just made the transition from Lando, being, for those, it's a tool for spinning up development environments in Docker, to using DDev, because it's become the de facto. Someone pulled me up for calling it the de facto standard. I don't know what else to call it. It's what most Drupal people use now. Using DDev, and it took me a while to get my head around it. God, DDev just works mostly.
DDev is good
compared to Lando. I'm like, because way back I chose Lando because DDev didn't support Postgres, and I didn't know Docker Compose well enough to write my own Docker Compose plugin. So I went, Lando it is. And then this is we're probably 10. I don't know how long that was Hobart. No, the Drupal South Canberra. I remember it was at Drupal South Canberra.
Oh man,
when was that?
6 years. That 2018.
Was
2018.
it 2018? Yeah. Okay, so that's when I started using Lando. I just made the switch to DDev, but DDev just like goes, it installs for you. I got a bit annoyed that it writes to your settings.php and doesn't really tell you what it's doing or how, and I had to spend 2 days digging into the code just so I understood what it does. Because this is a big gripe of mine. I wish software would tell me what it's doing, like explicitly. But funny, some people don't want to know
code,
that.
man.
I just want it to do this. Yeah, but I did, right? It took me hours of testing it. But you're looking at the code and you got to just go, install it with this command. Now install it on an existing site. Now install it on unconfigured existing site. Now and see what difference it does each time till I understand how it works.
Yeah.
But DDev, being able to spin up a fresh Drupal site is and ChatGPT makes some of these things easy now. Of course, that like this is a new tip because I just did it working with some issues with cores and wanting to do exactly this.
Yeah.
Like it's not working in production, so I want to figure out how it works. Like fine, it's not working in production, and someone else in production I don't even have access to. So all right, I'll install a fresh Drupal site. I'll put a front end on it because it's basically doing headless Drupal. So I've got Drupal. I want something to authenticate with Drupal and pull data out. Need to turn cores on, which is got cross-origin request. I don't know. So it allows one website to talk to another one, and your browser won't block it if you set it up properly. And then I ended up getting ChatGPT to help me write the bash script. That was just, it goes like it even did the run DDev, and then it runs the composer create project, and then it writes the services.file that sets up cores, and then it installs the OAuth module, and then it generates some keys, and then and once I had that script going, which ChatGPT was able to write for me in about 10, 15 minutes, which if I'd written that bash script myself, it's like 2 or 3 days work of debugging bash. But ChatGPT just goes, here's your bash script. Because it's, all those little nuances about this is how you check for a variable, and then this is how you check if something's in, and it just goes, there you go. And you go, maybe 3 or 4 iterations around it. But now I've got this little script that just spins up Drupal, writes the services.yaml, and because it's clean, it literally does the whole create project from scratch. I don't even have the Drupal config. It's a bash script that starts DDev, runs Drupal install, installs a couple of modules, generates some keys, writes the services.manual, right? And I had a switch where you could do it with Apache, so I'd either set up cores in Apache or that. That's such a nice way to just, because it's a fresh, clean, stock standard Drupal. And every time I just, it even had it detect that go, if those environments exist, delete them and then recreate them. So I could just sit there and run that script over and over again. And I just found that brilliant because every time I ran it, I was in the exact same known state. And that's often really hard to do because you mentioned it before about these systems are complex. Now, a big, well-known system like Drupal is so often hard to know what state you're in. The amount of times I've been debugging something and you'll test it and you'll debug it and you'll get to a certain point, you go, right, go back again. And it'll go somewhere else because the cache has changed or the cache is warm. So you clear the cache, but it only clears some of the caches. And then you're in an environment like, you got DDev and just so many things moving that every time you try and check what's going on, it just takes a different path through the logic every single time. And I've had that. I remember working one place once where same thing with Lando. I was trying to set state and I lost days because the state didn't always set. Because of some low-level Docker issue, right? It's just sometimes things are just plain bloody hard, and see, because I think it's partly been around so long as well. Because I was back in the day where you just wrote HTML file, that was it.
Yeah.
Now you're doing CGI scripts. You didn't have to worry about caching or Docker or setting up your dev environment. You just bloody wrote a script and there it is. And so when something went wrong, it was always to break it down and logically you go, I'm in this state. I did this, I got here. Then I was in this state, I did this, I got here. Now, back in the 90s, that's how I got taught to debug things. But now the systems have got so abstracted away. You got so many layers that you go, I was in this state, I did this, and I got here. And then I'm in that state. I went and I got here, and then I got hit, and then I got, and then,
Yeah.
you know, I'm lost. I'm lost in the weeds. I'm lost in the trees, which is why I come back to, if you can simplify the problem down and get rid of as many layers of abstraction as you want. Now, you talked about this earlier. It was, when did you mention it? We're talking something about those. You were talking about a tool before we came online where it said you didn't need to know JavaScript, but you did. That's such a common thing in web development, where you'll have some tool like Lando and DDev are a great example, right? They go, you don't need to know Docker until it doesn't work, right? As soon as you go to do something and it doesn't behave the way you expected and you need to know why, they go, look at the code. Well, now you've got to know Docker, right?
Yeah.
It's so you can tell me it's a tool designed so that devs don't need to know Docker or you like.
Yeah.
Right? It's if in a perfect world when everything works exactly how it's supposed to, I don't need to know Docker, but as soon as I need to figure out why it didn't do what I expected, DDev's nice though. So yeah, that's, I guess, Lando and DDev, rather than think of it as a tool that makes you not need to know Docker, I think of it as a set of libraries that does a lot of it. You know, it's not libraries, recipes.
Yes.
I started to look at Lando like that. It's a big pile of Docker Compose recipes and a tool wrapping to pull them together for you. So then you just don't need to write all the Docker Compose stuff. So it doesn't stop you having to know how to write a Docker Compose file. It doesn't save you having to know how to do it. It saves you having to do it. It's probably the good way to put it.
Yes.
That's all
absolutely.
around. Simplify the problem is the number one.
Absolutely.
Amount of times manager I worked with that asked me, well, what's different? You know, like if it works locally and it works on prod, what's different? And that simplifying the problem is one way to get down to get all the complex, and then you can slowly pull pieces back in. But sometimes your systems are so damn complicated, you know, that's and it brings me back around to quality control again. Because like you've got your production site and you go, right, we've got 20 custom modules. So I want to get rid of them just so I can test our one. But all these interconnected dependencies, you turn one off, they all turn off. And then half your website doesn't work. Now you can't access the page where your problem was because it was dependent on all these other ones. And I'm a big advocate for building that into testing. I've never got a project where I was able to be given the time to lay that framework properly in the beginning. I've always wanted a script that every time you do a deploy and run it through test, it'd do a speed test. You know, so you could actually see a graph over time of how slow your website got, because it always seems to be you're building your Drupal website, you build a custom module, you work for 2 months, and then client comes and goes, this page is slow. You're like, why is it slow? And you've got 2 months worth of custom modules to go through and go, at some point that, you know, and you don't even know, did it slowly get slow was it because there's more content? Is it too many modules? And I've always felt, I love the idea of prevention's better than a cure, because if you had something as part of the testing, as part of the QA, actually did the speed test and go, hey, on that last deploy, our website, this particular page, the response time went from 0.5 seconds to 5 seconds. Well, now you don't need to do a whole heap of investigative work. You know it was in that commit, right? And I think that's something that gets missed a bit in testing, just like response time. I've always wanted that, just while I'm out thinking about it, because it'll come up as a bug, right? And it's better to catch the bug when they happen. I mean, that's what we're talking about, debugging testing. See, and that's said it at the beginning, right? There's the cost benefit analysis, and there's a lot of lip service paid to, oh yeah, you got to have, like, that's the amount of times I've been in managers and you go, well, what do you want? Quality? Well, you got to have quality. Okay. Yeah. And then they're like, why is it taking so long? And you're like, well, I could take a shortcut. No, don't take a shortcut. Okay, well, we're going to, but it's got to get done now. And you're like, well, what's that old thing about the triangle? I think you can have it fast and cheap.
Right, yes.
Low quality. Oh, you can, because that's absolutely seems to be 100% true. But there's something, you got to have a certain level of character. Like as a web developer, you got to be able to have that pushback. And I'm telling you, if you're in a team that won't adjust, and they insist that it's got to be done quick, it's got to be done quality, and it's got to be done cheap, and that's just the end of it, get out, go work somewhere else.
Yeah.
Strong on that. That's of course, coming from me, spent way too long in places where it's just because it's hell.
Absolutely. All right. So when it comes to front end, let's finish up the front end part and then just move on to the back end. Use your Drupal use your browser console, get in there, have a look for errors. There are services that you can put in the front end that can give you, there's like a SaaS services that you can use. But yeah, when it comes to front end, replicate it and then just make sure you can see it break on the front end. Now, when it comes to server-side rendering, server-side errors, that's where we kind of specialize in as, Drupal developers. When things break on the back end,
Xdebug.
Yes, well, that's, yeah. The first thing is, again, replicating the problem, making sure on the server that you are logging errors. That's the first thing. And also how you're logging errors. This comes down to, though, platform, because of course you don't want to be using dblog to log errors. You want to log it somewhere. And there are services and open source software that can kind of log this at high speed, and you can then review it and aggregate it. But that's what you want. You want to have some type of mechanism where you can track these errors and see them happen.
That's in the production, because that's going about DevOps again. Because I've again been in a situation where they're like, "We got this bug," and you go, "I need access to the logs." So how do I get? I need this. No, you can't get the logs. So what do you mean I can't get the logs? Oh, it's too hard.
Yeah.
How am I supposed to? And then I've been in situations where the sysadmins are forever changing it. It's like every time and it especially happened when cloud first started, right? Because suddenly you've got hardware as a service kind of thing, and then like every week the logs are somewhere else. Like some service has come up and gone down, and it's got a new IP address. And then they go, well, you can't get it because you got to log in. You go, what's the IP address? Well, we'll have to look it up. And you go, tell me how to look it up. No, you don't have access to that. It's so important. And I'll bring it to an advocacy for, and I've said this before, DevOps is DevOps. There should be dev on the ops team. That's why it's called DevOps, right? Because if I'm a developer and I can't get access to the logs because DevOps went and built it and they didn't, it's too hard to get access to the logs, the dev's going to go, give access to the logs, right? I think that's the big advantage. That was the big promise of DevOps, being in your agile T-shaped thing. Like the dev's got enough knowledge to help on the sysadmin team, and that siloing effect. I think that siloing causes all sorts of bugging problems, because I've seen it enough times that they'll hire a DevOps and a cloud specialist to come in and build the whole infrastructure. And then I go, hey, Drupal guy, come and set up Drupal, come and fix Drupal. And you just go to deploy, and the deploy doesn't work. And you go, do you have a Drupal person on the DevOps team? No. You go, well, why don't you have a Drupal person on the DevOps team who could have told you about those 20 mistakes you made?
Yeah.
Right? Because Drupal's got its own way of doing things, and I could have, and it's like, and I've just got debates, right? I say arguments where they're going, well, write down what all those things are. It's like, I don't know what they are. It's 10 years of experience in my head. I don't have I've actually really thought about doing this. I want to do a Drupal for DevOps course to help solve this problem, that one, because, there are things like understanding how the settings.php works, understanding how config export, config import works, knowing that you've got to do a case clear and import config before you do a Drush update, but there's certain times when you've got to do that twice. Sometimes you've got to do a deploy to install a module before you do another deploy. Those things I want people, if anybody's a Drupal person who's just got some ideas you can throw down, because I want to collate a list of what are the gotchas when it comes to DevOps, because it helps, right? If you can, because the DevOps people, I used to, I've had worked with DevOps people who are like, an application's an application, and you're like, no.
Yeah.
That's why you get DrevOps, right? Drupal DevOps. There's a tool called DrevOps, but Drupal's got its own idiosyncrasies that, and that's those things, and they can be a real pain in the butt. Like not being able to get access to my logs, terrible. Not being able to write to settings.php, or having, sometimes where's it setting that setting from? And now it's like I worked on a project where forever just had to live with the fact that there was when you go to the config sync page, it just said these particular configs are out of date because it was Drupal config, but someone had written some code in the DrevOps that just went and set the variable in a bash file, right? So every time you deployed, it overrode the config, and it's just hard to go and look at and then same, you look at the status report and you've just got all these errors, and they're errors because someone in the DevOps has just gone and set something, and you go, but Drupal doesn't know you set it. So Drupal's complaining about it. And it's kind of, and I just, that's the mismatch between having your Drupal developer and your DevOps team. A lot of people complain about Agile and stuff, but if you're going to complain about Agile, at least learn some of those benefits, like cross-functional teams.
Yeah.
The soloing things, it causes these kind of issues. Like no gripe on the DevOps people. They know their cloud stuff. I don't know the cloud stuff very well at all, but when you've done it wrong, God, I can tell, right? Because now I can't access my logs, right?
Yeah, absolutely.
So I was a bit of a,
Well, other debugging tools when it comes to this type of stuff, because I did recently do a video on it, is web profiler for Drupal that gives you a nice little profile bar at the bottom that essentially profiles
there too.
Profiles each page and just gives you performance metrics about Drupal, Drupal specific stuff, such as how many forms you have on the page, rendering pipeline for templates, queries.
Use the tool is that there's a thing like that when you're on a page, it can tell you what controller is rendering that page.
Yeah.
And you can set it up so if you click on it, it'll just automatically open your editor.
Yeah.
And
that's web
it'll
profiler.
open your editor to the But if you ever set that up properly, that's the sort of thing that every time you're on a new project, you've got to set it up again, and you're like, oh god, it takes 2 days to get because now you're debugging the web pro, you get caught in these weeds, right? When you try and set things up. I want to know if anybody's managed to have some nice little developer templates, because I know every time I move, you work on a project and you work on a project for 6 months and you slowly set things like that up, right? You get Xdebug working, you get web profiler working, you set up views, you've got a couple of little bash scripts that set things up, and then they go, all right, you're not on that project anymore, you're on this one. You're like,
yeah,
Xdebug doesn't work, web profiler is not set up, and you got to go through it all again. And I've never been able to find a very particular easy way to get all those covered is that a problem somebody's worked on, or I think everyone's tried to solve it, right? Is that one of those problems?
Yeah, I think everyone's tried to solve it. Yeah.
So what's your take on, at one point, how do you make a decision about, am I going to spend 2 days setting up Xdebug and dealing with, because I find Xdebug, another one is, if you don't get every setting exactly right, it doesn't work. And it often takes me days to pull that apart and go, why is Xdebug doesn't work? I could have debugged this by hand in the time it took me to set Xdebug up. But I'm going to need Xdebug down the line anyway. So but then web profiler, I often
no. You need Xdebug. But Xdebug is in my humble opinion, is a non-negotiable when it comes to developing Drupal sites now. I've been
saying that for a long time. So
that is the first thing I set up, no matter what.
You don't be doing
Xdebug, because it's just wasting time.
The amount of times people still doing that, you just do a var dump.
No, you
can't.
Like, because most
99% of the times when you do a var dump, you get a memory error.
Exactly.
VAR dumps
That's it. That's it.
Yeah.
And I've worked with developers where I'm like, oh, just chuck a breakpoint in there, and they're like, what?
And they're like, what?
I'm like, oh, okay. All right. Okay.
I think this is a funny thing. This is a
Yeah.
is it the industry? I know people who call themselves senior devs who don't use Xdebug, whereas I'm like,
well, maybe they are.
that's kind of a defining line, right? Yeah, but those little things, like, it's not necessarily the being able to solve complex problems; it's the knowing how to not have those problems in the first place. It's a real valuable skill. Get Xdebug set up. A common error I've seen with Web Profiler is because Web Profiler does an override on a few classes kind of thing. Like it'll inject itself in front of some services. So if you've got a class that hasn't done a proper extends of the base class, Web Profiler doesn't pick it up, and installing Web Profiler makes your whole website break. See, this is my memory. I always forget these vague little details. Remember the concept. But when you extend a service and you've got to how do you do it? Like, you've got to inherit from the right base class.
Oh yeah.
And it's
extend.
Yeah. And I've seen a few projects I've worked on where I've gone in, like, because this is what happens a lot is, and I think we've both said this, it's very rare that we've been put on a project where we've been in the setup phase. You come in six months later and you're like, is Web Profiler installed? No. Yeah, okay, I'm going to install Web Profiler. Boom. Right? Because someone's written some code that breaks Web Profiler, and now I can't install Web Profiler on this very complex site that desperately needs Web Profiler. Yeah. Same with Environment Indicator. See, I think there's a list of certain little checklists that on every project you should have. Xdebug, Web Profiler, Environment Indicator is a savior, because Environment Indicator just tells you, that's the one you can set up to tell you if you're in dev or you're in prod. Having something like the Drupal debug with something that can generate some stock standard tests. What's that? In the Devel module, creates sample.
Oh, data. Yeah, generates data and things like that. Yeah.
Having that set up properly. Right, and that's something that goes back to the quality control, because if you make a new content type with a new field, you probably want to have something that, or at least a test that ties into testing too a bit. But I think it's the amount of projects I've come. That's so often you come onto a project 6 to 12 months down the track, and people haven't laid these foundational things. I think from when you say debug, I'm like, well, just. It's so much easier if you got all these tools you want to use, get those tools in first.
Yes.
Right. And there is this problem that you got a new client, your managers come in, the client wants to see some progress. And you go, what have you done this week? You go, well, I've got Xdebug working and I got the dev environment. And you go, yeah, but what can we show the client? And you go, nothing. And they don't like that. They want to be able to show the client something that the client understands. So they push you. You get this pressure from the people above you to not set those, just get it done, get it done. And it slows you down. I'm big on the, going slows faster. I've had so many debates about that. Mind you killed my analogy, I've got to tell you, because one of my big analogies for that is like when there are race car drivers racing and, if you want to win the race, when you're coming up to a corner, you've got to hit the brake before you get to the corner, or you're just going to go herring and trade into a tree. So it's a good example of, in order to get around the track faster, you've got to slow down.
Yeah, fair enough. Absolutely. Yeah.
Right. And then you were talking about go-karts to me the other week, and you were telling me about in the go-kart, when you get to the corner, you put your foot down.
Depends. It depends what type of car you're driving, really.
I was just like, Ivan's ruined my analogy. But it relates to the sharpen the saw one, right?
Yeah.
You're trying to chop a tree. If your saw gets blunt, you got to stop and sharpen your saw. And I think comes back to what we said right at the beginning, which we're coming up on. I think we're coming full circle now a little bit, because what did you say about laying our foundation, getting it? Why did I go blank? You said this at the start. Oh my God.
Don't worry, you can edit stuff out.
I'll leave it there. What did you say at the beginning? Because you brought it about just setting up your environment properly and stuff, something like that. Man, I can't remember, but that's Anyway, sorry. That's my brain for you. Just completely went blank. I had it in my head, and by mentioning what I had, I lost it.
Yeah. Oh, that's all right. That's right. But I mean, do we have anything else to cover? Yeah, we focused on the front end, the back end. A
lot of ranting in there.
Yeah, a lot of ranting in there. Well, yeah, let's finish up.
Yeah,
I think at this
point,
better
to avoid the problem than have to solve it. Like debugging, you have to do it. Bugs happen. You can't avoid them. Same thing. I've had someone say to me once, Bevan, you can't fix all the bugs. You're always going to have bugs. Like, there's no reason not to set it up. So it's like, try and lay the foundation. Try and be in an environment where you're set up properly.
Yeah.
This is probably more of a message to managers and product owners that, like, this is raw talk about what it's like as a dev. I think some people just missed it. Like, taking shortcuts in the start just really costs you down the line so much. Getting these things laid down at the beginning helps, right?
Absolutely.
Have a proper testing framework, have a DevOps framework that's done in league with your Drupal spread. Make sure your developers who are the expert on that particular domain of the application are on your dev team, set up your testing, get all your basic Xdebug development environment, deploy methods, all laid out early. You can't cover them all, but using the excuse of you can't cover them all as an excuse to not cover any of them. Right.
Yeah, that's true. That's true. Absolutely.
So that's how you debug. Don't have bugs.
Yeah. So please leave a comment below if you have any other great debugging tips or tricks. I'm always on the lookout of figuring out ways, because sometimes it happens to me where I have exhausted every single avenue. I don't know where to go. I don't know how to move forward. And then it's kind of like, all right, well, I need to start again. I need to, first of all, take a break from the problem, unless it's a, priority one showstopper. But sometimes you just need to take a break from the problem and separate yourself out and be like, you know what, I'm going to work on another ticket and get back to this. And I've actually said that, where I've been given a ticket, a kind of high priority ticket. This is the bug needs to be fixed. And then I told him, look, can I just work on another ticket quickly? Can I pick up this one, which will take me a day? I know what to do. I just need to kind of reset my brain. Then you work on it, you get a win, you feel great, wake up the next day, have your coffee, if you drink coffee, then
the problem solved itself.
and then you either, you come with like a fresh mind, and it's like, oh, why didn't I do that? And you try it out, and it's like, oh, that makes sense. And then it finally clicks. That's happened to me so many times.
It's a hard psychological thing to do, to go, I'm going to take a break.
Oh, absolutely.
This very critical thing. But 90% of the time, you'll come in the next day and go, sometimes it doesn't work though. Sometimes you come in the next day and go, this is still got no idea.
It's like,
right?
Is it broken? Yep, still broken.
Yeah, damn it. But sometimes the cobbler's elves fix it for you overnight. I've seen that happen too, right? You just go away, you come in the next day and you go, works now. And that's the rubber ducky's always a good one. Tell you, they get a bit mystical and magical. The number of times I've just gone, turn around and have a huge big whinge about it, it'll start working. That's just that one time you turn around and just go, I've been at this thing for hours. I've had it. Just look. Oh, it works.
And that's it.
Don't know why that happens. It does. There's something about when you finally lose your stack, it'll just magically start working, just to prove that you're blowing your stack was like make you look stupid.
Yeah.
It's all
right, pixies. Let's leave it at that.
Okay.
Right.
Thanks.
We'll see you all next week or next time. See ya.